been available. And today we're talking about how to persevere. So I don't have to be the one to tell you that 2020 has been a whirlwind, but whether you are starting a business, whether you're in a relationship, you're navigating a marriage, or you are moving, or you have a big goal in front of you, perseverance is a quality that many of us aspire to have and can oftentimes or sometimes feel like a challenge. So today I'm going to share two powerful strategies to help you persevere, with one caveat at the end. So stay tuned for what that is. It's really important to think about. I also want to share what's possible when we take these strategies and actually implement them into our life. And I want to share a client testimonial who launched an online course and no one purchased within that first week of the launch. And what do we do when we launch something, when we do the thing, like we've persevered all this way, we do the thing we've been working toward for so long, and then the outcome isn't what we thought it would be? What happens then? Then we get to take a step back, use that opportunity just like my client did, and in fact, see it as a blessing in disguise, which oftentimes it is. If something doesn't work the way we thought it was going to work, there's often so much information there, just like my client, who realized that in a large part of why this didn't work is because the focus was completely off from where we had originally started, from what his original goal and focus was for this business, not only in an online course, but his greater business concept as a whole. And so having this blessing in disguise to take a step back and say, whoa, what happened here, actually invited him and allowed him to clarify with even more confidence what his business was, what the foundation was that he was standing on, and then brainstorm a bunch of new possibilities that were so much greater than this one kind of narrow visioned course and one narrow visioned outcome that fear had actually latched onto for him. All right, so let's dive right in. Two strategies, one surprising caveat at the end for how to persevere. The first strategy is self-compassion. I studied this a ton when I was training for positive psychology, back when I thought I was going to obtain my PhD. I was writing my master's thesis and I dove all in Kristen Neff's research, who is kind of the center point of self-compassion in the positive psychology field. So as defined by the research, self-compassion has 3 traits to them. And in all the research, it was surprising to me at first, maybe not surprising in hindsight, but self-compassion, when we have these 3 traits in mind, when we do the practices to strengthen these 3 aspects of self-compassion, it helps in goal attainment. It helps in, like studies specifically look at weight loss and at academic rigor and academic success. Self-compassion has such great benefits for us. And I found, and the research suggests, that self-compassion isn't our automatic response to goal attainment and to something like perseverance. Oftentimes, we revert to things like self-criticism and punishment, as opposed to rewarding ourselves and celebrating and being kind to ourselves in the midst of challenge and in the midst of success even. So these 3 aspects of self-compassion: one is self-kindness as opposed to self-judgment. So that might be what you typically think of when you think of self-compassion. You're kind to yourself. The second is common humanity versus isolation. This is a really important thing to consider and a really easy tool and mindset shift to implement right away as well, to get you back into this place of self-compassion. So common humanity is this idea of everyone, even if they're not going through exactly what I'm going through, can relate to what I'm going through. Or in other words, I am not alone in this struggle. I am not alone in this challenge. A good example is, let's say you're a parent on a playground and your child is throwing an absolute tantrum and everyone else seems to have perfect children and everything is going right and it looks easy for them. In those moments, to bring ourselves back to self-compassion is to remind ourselves that these children also have tantrums at home, that these parents also navigate the challenges that come with being a parent, in addition to these moments that we might see on the surface of all fun and games. So that is common humanity, the second component of self-compassion. And the third is mindfulness versus over-identification. So to be mindful and to be present of everything that's going on in our life. So that's not to dismiss anything, even the negative emotions, but rather to be mindful of them rather than over-identify with them. In the Yes and Experience, which is my group program, the past few calls, we've talked a lot about blanket statements, especially because last month's focus was self-doubt. And we noticed how powerful these blanket statements were, and especially how popular they were with our self-doubt voices. Because it can be easy to say, I'm bad at math, as opposed to, I'm really struggling with this one specific challenge, with this one specific question. Likewise, we could say, I failed as a business owner if something like a course didn't launch as we thought it would the first day, the first week. However, what's more specific and more mindful is to say, this specific launch didn't bring in clients, at least yet in this moment. So again, to stay present, to stay mindful, and to not fall into that over-identification or those blanket statements. So those three components, bring yourself back into self-compassion, a really powerful way to persevere, and as the research suggests, a really powerful strategy to attain your goals and to maintain your goals. So not only to achieve one of them, but to then not experience burnout on the other side of it, because you've been kind to yourself the whole time. You've been building awareness. You've been noticing the world around you rather than criticizing yourself and going in and having these over-identifying blanket statements that make everything feel 10 times as bad as it actually is. Kristen Neff, I mentioned, is the leader of this, at least in the positive psych world, and you can visit her website at just Google search Kristen Neff self-compassion. I'll also include a link in the blog once this goes live on my website for her practices. She has some really powerful practices to implement and return to self-compassion. The second strategy for maintaining your drive, for persevering through no matter what you're navigating, is systems. I am a huge fan of systems, and systems do something for us that is maybe we feel we don't have the time to do at first. However, in the long run, it helps us to reduce something called decision fatigue. So in the present moment, maybe I'm going to imagine myself as someone who's really overwhelmed. I am trying to organize all my client meetings versus my VA meetings and these collaborations that I have going on. And it feels like I'm in this reactive state and trying to get everything done and trying to just like get back to the top of the water, like not be drowning anymore. When we're in that state, that reactive state, we can sometimes just keep reacting and never take the time to step back or proactively step back and set systems in place for ourselves so that we're not in that place of reactivity and overwhelm. Systems also, as I mentioned, decision fatigue can help so that the things that can be automated are automated. And therefore, we're not making so many decisions that when it comes to making a decision we actually have to make, that's really important, we're already burnt out and exhausted by that point. We want to avoid that. In the book, The One Thing, which some of you have heard me state before because I absolutely love this book, they mention a few activities that are known to diminish willpower. And willpower, I think, has a very strong correlation to perseverance, right? We want the willpower to be able to persevere. So these are some activities that diminish willpower: implementing new behaviors, filtering distractions, resisting temptation, suppressing emotion, restraining aggression, taking tests, trying to impress others, coping with fear, doing something you don't enjoy, selecting long-term over short-term rewards. So some of these things maybe aren't completely avoidable. We can't necessarily systematize all of them. Implementing new behaviors, for instance, to make that decision and to start a new routine takes some effort, and maybe intentionally we're not setting up a system for ourselves. However, flip that and see if there is an opportunity. For instance, with implementing new behaviors, maybe you can create a system like you have a workout class if you're trying to implement a workout routine that is the same time every day that you sign up, and if you cancel, you're charged, or some incentive or some motivation for you to follow through with this thing that you're building, this new habit you're building. So there are some aspects of it that you can systematize and maybe something that you can't. However, the ones that you really can, that I see in this list, for instance, resisting temptation or filtering distractions. So a good example of this, a really easy example of this, is our phones and our computers and the notification systems that are oftentimes automated. They're automatically put as to notify us of a new message, of someone liked our post, of whatever it is. They automatically pop up, and that becomes a distraction. And even if we think we're not being distracted, we definitely are being distracted. Our mind goes there for a second. And if we can reduce that from even happening in the first place, we don't have to continually pull ourselves back to the task that we were doing. And we don't have to use that motivation to look at the distraction and then come back, look at the distraction and then come back. So to put systems in place for yourself that reduce the decision fatigue, that reduce the distractions, that automate the things for a way that works for us as opposed to against us in all the different areas that we can. A few of my favorite ways of doing this and implementing systems to reduce decision fatigue, which again, in turn helps our motivation and perseverance, is to set recurring calendar events. So some of you, especially if you were in August's Experience Challenge, you have seen my calendar, and I have a lot of events, a handful of events that recur every single week, and automating these to recur every single week reduces any decision that comes with making them. Furthermore, I don't have to think about things as much, which is great because I don't need to think about those things. I know that every week I'm going to have a weekly spark at 10:30 a.m. on Tuesdays. I know that every week I'm going to have about 10 to 8 client sessions. So I put those in my calendar. Even if, for instance, those client sessions aren't in my calendar yet, I can still block off 8 to 10 hours each week of time for clients. And so then when it comes to scheduling, I don't have to think first, how many hours again do I have to reserve for clients, or overbook myself and then be in this place of overwhelming reactivity like I talked about before. And it just reduces not only the decision making, but the planning, and then eases my planning for anything else that I want to fit into my schedule. So recurring calendar events are a big one for me that helps reduce that decision fatigue and helps to maintain my momentum because I'm not expending energy where I don't need to expend energy. A few other examples that I'll list off quickly is scheduling for my clients. So a system to schedule for my clients. I use Acuity. There are many different scheduling systems that, again, just reduce any input from you. You set your calendar, you automate it so that it syncs with your calendar, and then your clients have the autonomy to choose and reschedule and cancel and do everything that they need to do on their own rather than a million emails going back and forth. Another thing is automatic payments, or with if you accept checks as payments, to post-date checks that can be for rent. Oftentimes landlords can accept post-dated checks. Maybe for your service provider, you can post-date checks, which means you send all 12 at once, but they won't be submitted until the date that they're actually written on. Again, so you just don't have to think about it for the rest of the year or the rest of the 6 months, or however long you're submitting payments for. To block, structure your days. So to have big blocks in your days for tasks rather than constantly switching task to task to task. A morning routine, a capsule wardrobe, and using the one thing mentality, which I mentioned from the book, to prioritize my day. So at the beginning of each day, I have a morning routine that sets my mind, that allows me to ease any stress, that puts me in a good state of mind so that I can persevere, or I know where to not persevere, coming up, the caveat in a moment. And then at the very end of my journal exercise each morning, I say, what is the one thing today? The one thing I want to get done. And likely there are more than one things that I'm doing in a day, but it allows me to prioritize and to keep top of mind. Maybe it's oftentimes if I have a client that day, that is the one thing. That's my main focus, is my clients. And so I write down, whoever I'm working with that day, this is the one thing, the most important part of my day. So throughout the day, if I feel myself getting distracted or overwhelmed or pressure to do all these other things, I remind myself what I wrote down in the morning. The one thing was my client. Did I show up for her, for him as fully as I could? Was it a great session? Am I there replying to messages that clients may have sent me? then it's a day well done, and then I can rest, which leads me to the caveat. The caveat for this, I gave you 2 strategies for how to persevere, but the caveat that's really important and I want to emphasize during a Yes and webinar on perseverance is to rest, to ask yourself, do you need to persevere? More than systems, more than, automating calendar events or practicing self-compassion practices throughout your days and trying to just get through the next thing. I highly encourage you to take a step back whenever you are feeling that drive and that pressure to persevere, is to ask yourself if you need to be persevering or if you want to be persevering with this specific thing. So a good example I'll use from my own business, I wrote a weekly blog every single week for a long time. I think I have 80 some blogs on my website. For me, it was a great way to write, and I wanted to be consistent and show up consistently for you, for my audience, as much as I could. And so that's why I implemented the weekly blog. I was also playing with different content strategies at the beginning of my business. However, once I started writing my book earlier this year, I was feeling very overwhelmed, and there was a voice in the back of my mind that said, but you have to keep showing up consistently with your blog. You have to keep doing that. And I could have adopted self-compassion practices. I could have automated some things. I was automating that calendar event to write the weekly blog. But in taking a step back, I reminded myself why that blog was implemented in the first place, why it was important to me, which was to be consistent for you and to write, to have writing as a consistent part of my practice, because I knew that was going to be a part of my business. When I looked at that, I saw that I was fulfilling those 2 things in different means. I no longer had to or even wanted to write a weekly blog to maintain that consistency for you. I was showing up in different ways at the time, or to write because I was suddenly now writing a book. So I definitely had writing in my weekly schedule and in my routine and within my business structure. So give yourself permission as well to step back when you are asking yourself, how can I persevere through this? To first clarify for yourself, do you want to be persevering through this? Do you need to be persevering through this? And then why? Why are you going to persevere through this? And that holds so much power to clarify for yourself why the perseverance even has to take place or why you want it to take place. And I would say even emphasis on the wanting it to take place. Because if you know your why, if you know why you have this in your daily routine, in your goals, in whatever it is that you're persevering through, your relationship, right? If you know the why of it, that's the foundation you can stand on and return to if you're ever feeling challenged or overwhelmed or distraught about this thing in your life. You have the why, you have the foundation to stand on. A bonus to this is to take a break completely. So similar to self-compassion, maybe it's a little counterintuitive, self-compassion, to implement that as a way to motivate us, although it's proven by the research to work. Taking a break is another thing that we often don't think of or give ourselves permission to when it comes to perseverance and motivation. However, taking a break, both by the research and my personal experience and watching clients do this, is so powerful for perseverance because it revitalizes us. It gives us the space to brainstorm and be bored and come up with new ideas that we never would come up with when we're in reactivity or in stress, to give ourselves space to enjoy the process and the journey that you're going on so that you want to continue, so that you know why you're building this thing, you're creating this thing, you're staying with it, because you're also enjoying it along the way. So please give yourself permission not only to clarify your why and to take a step back and give yourself permission to say if you want to do this or not, but also give yourself permission to completely take a break from it. Set a boundary for yourself if that feels comfortable. So, I'm going to give myself 1 week off from writing my book, which I did 2 weeks ago. And then last week I finished my book. Give yourself that boundary of how long you want to take a break. And then after that boundary is complete, after that timestamp, come back in, ask yourself if you're ready, ask yourself if there's any fears that are self-sabotaging as opposed to just needing that break. You already took the break, so you know that is has been taken care of at least a little bit, and gift yourself that space, even if it's an hour, even if it's a 30-minute walk, even if it's a 10-minute nap. please give yourself that space to rest and rejuvenate and enjoy the journey along the way. It's not all about grinding and like scrunching our face and getting caught up in the task at hand. It's also about taking a step back from the task, remembering your why, and also just enjoying the rest and enjoying yourself and taking care of yourself. So there you have it. 2 strategies. You have self-compassion, you have systems and automation for how to persevere, with this bonus caveat, which is to remind yourself why, or if you even want to be persevering, and also to give yourself permission to take a break. With this, if your question is, how do I persevere through this? Or do I want to persevere through this? Or what are some strategies that I can persevere through this? Whatever your question is in relation to perseverance, I have a tool for you to answer that question, reduce decision fatigue, because you will be guided through the process in just 15 minutes, and it's completely free. I highly recommend you to take advantage of this. It's my decision quiz. You can find it at yesandbymarin.com/decide. I will put the link below as well for you to access this. And it walks you through step by step in a very customizable way, you to ask your question, walk through your dreams and your goals and your values and your fears, and then come up not only with a solution, with a next step, but your first action step to then implement that decision into your life. So visit yesandbymarin.com/decide to get that decision quiz in your inbox and utilize it to answer your question about if you want to persevere, how you can persevere, or what strategy you want to use to persevere. I'm here for you in full support, including every single Tuesday at 10:30-ish for your weekly spark. These live videos go live at 10:30. However, they're also posted at yesandbymarin.com. So check those out if you want the written version and the links that I mentioned in the videos. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday, and I will see you again next week.